is a woman, and she finds him incredibly powerful, but like she has a completely different relationship with him. And that's very interesting as well. That's Callie, JS. Yeah, she often calls him, and yeah, it's quite interesting. He'll often ask for, if she's doing a session with women, he'll ask her, "Can I come to the session?" And things like this, and he will sit in on the session with her, not physically, but like in a mental form. Yeah, so he's so I find the Shemaz sigil, I find it really, really powerful. And like I said, my friend got a manifestation. Callie literally, she talks to him in the same way I'm talking to you. I've seen her do that, and it was that was pretty mind blowing as well. You know,
So,
so
JS, have you seen what he looks like? Have you Evo carried out an evocation? I can't. Yeah, is
Okay.
that the way you say it?
Okay. So first of all, what Brian just described that happened to his friend getting the physical manifestation in the kitchen. I'm gonna say I'm jealous because that has never happened to me with Shimmy. Like he has never come through in a physical form like that. So that's pretty remarkable. And I would love to have like been a fly on the wall to sit in on that conversation, especially if you say it like got heated and whatnot. Um, all right, so I do have manifestations of Shemyaza, like even on camera, and it's typically an orb. All right, it'll be like it's usually like a huge like purple light that'll be like floating around the ritual space while I'm doing a ritual with him. And I have had a face-to-face encounter, but I was not conscious. Okay, so this was, I don't know if I was out of body in a like a soul travel experience or if it was just the craziest, most realistic dream I've ever had. But he looked terrifying to me. And this is my first contact with him, and he initiated the contact. I didn't even know who Shemyaza was. I never even heard the name. I actually wrote about this, but yeah, it was weird. Like I laid down in bed. It was a Saturday night, and I was laying there staring at the ceiling, contemplating, trying to go to sleep, and it felt like I got sucked through the mattress. And the next thing I know, I'm falling. And I was falling for a while, and I land in this river, and you look down, the river splits into two directions. It was dark, it was kind of creepy looking, and there's like, look around, there's like 30 other people standing in the river with me, like chest deep water, and everybody looks confused, just as confused as I am, and they're all just like looking around like, where are we at? And then you hear like this like terrifying roar from behind me, and I turn around, and there's this huge creature barreling toward us. It kind of looked like Predator, only a lot bigger and scarier with longer arms. It had like Rastas. It was freaky looking, and long claws, and it's just coming right for us. Like it's going to eat us. And so everybody's freaking out, and like they're like trying to climb over each other. They're trying to run, but they can't really get anywhere because they're in like chest deep water. And I'm just like, common sense. There's no way I'm going to outrun this thing, so I'm just going to go under the water. I'm gonna go underwater, swim over here, and let him eat the rest of the school of fish, and I can get away. So I did. So I freaking, in this dream experience, like I go under the water, and when I go underwater, I see my arms like grow out into these long claws, like the creature had. And it was like, it was like, whoa, what the hell? And then I stand back up, and I'm normal, and I'm out of the water, and I'm just like, by then I'm starting to forget this thing's coming after me. I was like, well, I'm gonna do that again. I go back under the water, my arms like grow out, and I'm just like clawing at some of these legs that I'm seeing squirming around in front of me. And then I stand back up again, and like I was totally normal. I go under the water again, I come back up, and this thing's right on top of me. And instead of ripping me to shreds, it wrapped its arms around me and dove into the water. And it's like when we went under the water, like I kind of like just absorbed into him, and then I like grew these arms out and became this creature. And then when I stood up the last time, I remained that creature. And then I woke up. All right. So I wake up and I sit up in bed, and it felt like someone drove a railroad spike through my forehead, and then my nose starts bleeding, like literally dripping blood out of my nose. And I hear the name Shemyaza it was like it was whispered. All right. Like somewhere in the room, some invisible entity whispered that name to me. And I'm just like in bed. I'm like, what the hell just happened to me? You know, and I like go to the bathroom and my nose eventually quits bleeding. It hurt really bad. Like I had like, I mean, literally felt like somebody drove a nail through my forehead and caused a nosebleed. And I was like wondering, like, was I sleepwalking? Did I cram a pencil up my nose or something in my sleep? Like, what in the hell was that? So that was my first contact with Shimyasa. And, you know, I didn't even know that that was a real name. It was like a week later, there's this episode of Ancient Aliens playing, and I'm like walking around the house, and then I hear them mention Azazel and Shimyaza. I'd heard of Azazel. Everybody's heard of Azazel. I'd never heard of Shimyaza up to that point. You know, this was several years ago. And so I just like stopped what I was doing and started watching the episode. And then I started, you know, researching. All I could really find was the Book of Enoch. And I continued to have experiences with this entity that I did not initiate. They were scary, but at the same time, like comforting. Like even in the dream initially, where this like thing was coming after me, I never recalled feeling scared. Which is crazy because in a real situation like that with a monster coming at you, you'd be fucking scared. Sorry for my language there.
Oh, that's okay. But then Belial, did you ever do a working with Azazel as well?
Oh, I've done lots of workings with Azazel. Yeah, I actually summon Azazel every time I do the rite of deification. I summon the four gatekeepers, as we call them. It's Amemon, Azazel, Abaddon, and Belial. And then I summon Astarte, the goddess of love and war, the female counterpart and wife of Shimyaza, the first example that we know of a human that literally ascended to godhood through the knowledge and teachings of Shimyaza. And then I invoke Shimyaza lastly during every single one of those rituals. And then something else takes over. And, a lot of times after the ritual, I won't remember lots of it, like bits and pieces of it. It's another reason I like to film them so I can watch it. And it's always weird seeing a video of myself doing that particular ritual because it's like I'm staring at myself like, that is not me. And it always seems like a fuzzy dream after I'm done. It's like I'll just kind of like snap out of this trance-like state. And I'm like, damn, how long have I been in the circle? Oh, wow, 5 hours? Yeah, it didn't seem like it. And yes, these experiences for me have always been fascinating. They have been terrifying at times, especially in path workings, like the path working I originally did with Belial. I'm going to say after that, there's not very much that scares me anymore. Like, yeah.
What do you think Azazel looks like? I heard Coeting say that he saw him on a throne with serpents. Is that how you've seen him?
Actually, I believe that he said King Paimon. He saw him on a throne of serpents. Maybe he saw Azazel in the same way. Everyone that I've talked to that has, had dream encounters with Azazel or even written about him, they always describe him as extremely masculine, strong, warlike. That's what he taught men how to make weapons and swords, and he taught women how to utilize makeup. It was like he taught war and beauty. Like all the technology and stuff that we have now, I think came from these guys. I mean, because like we're talking about whenever they got here, the humans didn't even know how to make swords or mine for metals. So that's what Azazel. Each of these watchers that it describes in the Book of Enoch, they all taught humans different things. Some taught mathematics. Some taught the art of written language. But they taught astronomy, the knowledge of the moon and the stars. Azazel taught men how to make swords and how to use them, and he taught women how to beautify themselves. And Shimyaza taught sorcery, taught root work and sorcery. So,
and is Shemyaza above someone like Paimon?
I honestly wouldn't know. I think that these entities are all extremely powerful. And I think that they're all good at different things. Now, as far as a hierarchy, I imagine there is a hierarchy. A lot of people would sit here and debate about that all day. Who's in charge, But, for example, they call Belial the one without a master. Like, nobody's in charge of Belial. He has all power over all domains. He is his own god. And, so it's hard to sit here and compare two entities, like to compare Azazel and Shemyaza. I think they're pretty equal in power, and they just, they teach and do different things. I think that the reason Shemyaza was declared the leader of the Watchers, I think they chose him to lead them because I think he was the wisest. I think that he probably had the most wisdom and ability to form civilization and be diplomatic. And, he represented them. And I think the decisions came down to him ultimately because they all trusted him to make them for him.
And do you think that Azazel is Iblis? Because didn't Iblis fall from heaven? Are we talking about Lucifer now, I suppose?
Yeah, I say Azazel was Iblis. Supposedly, Satan and Iblis are the same entity. That's what I've heard said many, many times.
And who is Satan? Is Satan an entity?
Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And, that's all up for debate. Everybody has a different idea of what Satan is, of what these beings are. All I could do is give you my opinions. A lot of people would say, Satan and Iblis are the same and that they're both like, chief of the jinn, chief of the demons, the top dog in charge.
And have you done a working with Satan?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
All right. Does Satan have a sigil?
Yeah, Satan has a sigil. A lot, actually. Most people use this behind me as Satan's sigil. Like, right. That's the most commonly used sigil for Satan. Others will utilize what is commonly known as Lucifer's sigil. I don't have that printed out in front of me right now, but I've been able to evoke Satan through that. And a lot of people will tell you that Lucifer and Satan are the same being. Some people will say that they're different. I wrote an article called The Satan. It was published in one of EA's books, where I talk about, the Satan as I refer to it as a race. Like Satan's kind of the blanket term that everybody else gives anything for being evil. It's all Satan, it's all the devil. What if Satan is the collective consciousness of the adversarial race, which is anyone who embraces and walks the path of the adversary? Anyone that says, you know what, I'm not going to bow down, I'm not going to obey you, I'm not going to follow your rules, I'm not going to believe in your false religion that wants to control me and enslave me and take all of my money and freedom away. What if Satan is the adversarial consciousness that is within all of us?
I think you're probably right. I suppose if we're half made up of the Watchers and half ape, then I suppose we would have that, wouldn't we?
Quite possibly. And I just want to say, like, I don't have a degree in theology. I'm not a professor. I have no credentials. I'm just a hillbilly from Georgia that suddenly decided to start practicing black magic and see what I could do with it, and started sacrificing chickens in his yard one day. And I've done a lot of path workings and practice a lot, but I'm not qualified to declare anything or state things as fact. These are my opinions based on my experiences. So I could be right. Really, the only way I can judge whether or not I'm right about something when it comes to magic is if it actually works.
I mean, me and Jace have spoken about the satanic race or the ill-bliss race. I mean, there are pretty conclusive translations of both Iblis and Satan, and it seems that they apply it to a race, not necessarily an individual. But once again, it's thousands of years ago. We don't really know, which is you know, so it's pointless arguing. But through what I've read and what I understand is the adversary is a race. It's not necessarily one person.
But Iblis is a person or a being, right?
Once again, I think it's a blanket term. I think it's a blanket term. You know, it's not necessarily. It's one, but it's many. If that makes any sense, it's this is what makes magic incredibly difficult, and it also makes magic incredibly easy. It goes back to what JS says. You know, at the end of the day, if you can summon an entity, that entity comes through, and you have a reasonable working relationship with it, then you know you're doing everything reasonably correctly. You know, but I think the problem is, going back to what JS said earlier, it's very difficult to keep humble when you're dealing with such entities and you do something and you make something happen. It's very easy for the ego to take over, and you know I think these things have to be remembered that you know it's not a game. It's a very serious science, and I think that's what people should remember, that like, you know, that people dedicate their entire lives to this, you know, to write the grimoire or whatever. And realistically, when you read these grimoires, that they're highly personalized to how that person interacts with the entity. So, you know, I mean, I think that's the thing with magic. There's always more questions than what there is answers. But the really true answer is whether or not you can control the entity, or at least communicate with the entity. You know, and to me, that's probably the litmus test in reality. Because it's, you know, we can all talk about it till the cows come home, but at the end of the day, there's very few people out there who can get any form of manifestation or any form of interaction, because it's extremely difficult. And the other side of the coin is, I think that, going back to what Jay said again, the reason why you're not a hick who's shoveling shit in the back garden is because the gods spoke to you. They said, no, mate, you've got another mission. You know, end of story. Otherwise, you'd still be doing what your ancestors did. You know, and it takes a big thing to say, no, I'm going to follow this intuition, and that is listening to the inner voice. And listening to the inner voice is an incredibly difficult skill, because of course the ego is always in the way. You know, it doesn't matter how old you are, the ego is in the way, to put it bluntly. You know, it's sort of, and I think that's your problem. It's like the other day I told you that I had relatives who've got a farm, and they were about to go bankrupt because it hadn't rained for God knows how long. And I said, I can make it rain for you. And they said, oh, yeah, if you can make it rain, that'll be brilliant. And I made it rain. And literally, when I say rain, it came down in stair rods, yeah, for literally about 5 hours. Then when the rain stopped, I said, look, you must kill one of your chickens and spread its blood on the land. And I said, oh, we'll do it tomorrow. I said, no, you've got to do it now. And they didn't do it. And when I drove my car away, I caught a tiny branch on the road, and it pulled the front end of the car off. Thanks. And then after seeing that, they then killed the chicken. But, you know, by then my car has been destroyed. You know, it's sort of like, you know, and that was ego. You know, yeah, I wanted to help them, but what I should have said, going back to what JF said, was, okay, if you want me to help you, then you have to slaughter the chicken before I do anything, to put it bluntly. But, you know, even at 63, you know, the ego can get in the way. So, you know, be warned, so to speak.
Yeah, everyone that I've seen, that, you know, they'll come into learning this science that we call sorcery, ritual magic. Everyone that I've seen, like, it become their downfall, like destroy their life. It was from a place of ego. You know, they come in humble. They learn some things. They have some successes with spell work or causing action at a distance. and maybe they get a taste of the power of the entities that they're working with. Well, then it goes to their head. Then their head swells up, they become arrogant, they become cocky, and then they start having what we call delusions of grandeur, believing that they are something more than what they are. And a lot of them I'll hear say, "Oh, I believe I'm the incarnation of, you know, this entity." I've had like 30 people write me on the internet saying I'm the reincarnation of Lucifer, you know, blah blah blah. I'm just like, yeah, okay. See you in the middle. Yeah. Like those people, delusions of grandeur are the most common thing that gets people into trouble on this magical path that we walk. You have to keep yourself in check. You have to remain humble, because if you do not, then you will be humbled and you will be put into check, because you do not want to disrespect these entities that you work with, and you don't want to lose their respect.
So what pathworking books would you recommend?
Oh, good question. Well, the first book that I started out with to learn evocation was it's called Evoking Eternity. It was written by E.A. Coetting. It's still for sale on becomealiving.god.com. That's really the best book that I've come across that teaches you how to perform an evocation. Like there's no missing information. It's from start to finish. And I didn't know how to perform an evocation when I got that book. I read the book, I followed the instructions to a T, and I performed a successful evocation. So I'm going to say that's very good to start with if you're interested in learning how to summon these entities. It gives you, you know, universal techniques that can be applied to just about any ritual. Another book that's really good is the Simon Necronomicon. I work with those entities. I follow the instructions on how to summon them, and I've gotten excellent results working with those entities. Now, I will say that it is kind of hit and miss. I've done workings from that book that did not work, and I've done workings from that book that did work. More often than not, I got what I was going for. So whenever a ritual doesn't work, you got to ask yourself why. Why didn't it work? There's got to be a factor that you're missing, something that you need to alter, you need to change, or maybe what you're asking for is not something you should be asking for, or maybe the entity's not willing to do it. You know, if you get mad at your neighbor, you know, and go summon a war god and ask him to kill your neighbor because he, you know, I don't know, trimmed one of your trees on the edge of the property, the entity's not going to respect that. And you might find there's nasty spirits out there that will hurt that person anyway. But, you know, if you summon one that's going to look at you and be like, you know, you're being a child, you know, you want me to go hurt this guy because he cut the limb off one of your trees that was hanging over his fence. Like, people use curses for really immature, stupid things. And what you don't realize, or what these people don't realize, is that when you throw a death curse at someone, you might as well be pointing a gun at them and pulling a trigger. It's no different. If they die as a result of that, or they get extremely harmed as a result of that, then you may as well have done it to them physically. And, you know, if people thought that way, they'd be a lot more responsible. It's like, oh, you're going to curse this person, but if you could get away with it, would you go shoot them? Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. Like, all right, why are you going to curse them? You know, things should be used like that. It should be reserved for, you know, life and death situations that are worth it. And so, you know, you get a lot of people that, you know, they're angry people. They've been picked on their whole life, and they want to be able to take that power back. So they learn some black magic, they learn how to do some curses. Next thing you know, they are just freaking throwing curses at anybody and everybody. You know, anyone that pisses them off, they're trying to curse them. Anybody that disagrees with them on the internet or insults them, they're trying to curse them. People that do that, behave that way, typically end up destroying themselves.
Or being destroyed. I mean, we know, we won't mention his name, but both JS and I introduced him to this person, and part of his repertoire is he has a hunter jinn, okay, a witch hunter jinn, genuinely, and him and his Sufi friends, they patrol the internet looking for lunatics who are just cursing people. Yeah, you know, you see them out there, and essentially they set their hunter jinns on them. And I really wouldn't want to be that person. And I try and tell people this, that, you know, like you start running your mouth off on the internet, you're going to attract these people who, who, if they consider you a threat, will eradicate you. There's no two ways around it. And I think cursing is a real problem. I mean, sort of like, I have cursed, but the point being is it's been like the last thing. Yeah, it's absolutely the last quota. Yeah, I go through all the negotiations first, and if the person still won't negotiate, then I warn them, and usually they laugh because they don't take you seriously. But like, I would say that like, cursing is probably one of the worst things you can actually do to yourself as well, because you always pay for a curse in some way or another. That's my experience. Generally speaking, you curse somebody badly, and that curse will reflect into your life on some level. And that is the unfortunate side of it. I've never known anybody who's been able to curse somebody and walk away from it and be unscathed. And I think that's the other thing with cursing is yeah, they say, oh, it comes back 3 times, but I think people forget that. I don't believe people when they say that they curse and it doesn't come back. What do you think about that, Jess?
Well, that's a damn good question. I will say I don't believe in the threefold law or anything like that. I think that what people are doing is because all the Wicca books and things like that tell you that, oh, if you curse somebody, it's going to come back on you threefold. I'm not going to say you're wrong and say that throwing a curse does not somehow affect you in your life. It very well may, and it may have done that to me, and I just didn't even realize what it was. But the threefold law is essentially the law of attraction, tricking us into using the law of attraction against ourselves. We do something, it's just like karma. Karma is the biggest mind bone of all time. And the reason I'll say this is because if karma was a law, if it was real, then the most evil, disgusting people in the world, just human traffickers and pedophiles, would not be the richest, most powerful in the world. All right, like they would not be running for president and things like that, because karma would kick them in the ass for their evil deeds long before they ever got to that point of power. All right, so these are the same people that are pushing religion on us and the threefold law and hell and karma. So I think that if you do something bad and or something that you think is bad and you believe it's bad and you believe that therefore this mysterious force called karma is going to now punish you for that bad thing you did, then you are essentially manifesting that bad thing in your life. I think because so many people believe in karma that they've essentially created an egregor, an entity that literally follows you around and spanks you every time you do something wrong. And by believing in that and feeding into that entity, it does exactly that. You create your own punisher. All right. Truly evil people with no conscience, they don't seem to suffer from karma. They might come across somebody like us that puts them in the ground eventually, but yeah, I mean, the true evildoers with no conscience that don't believe in karma, it does not seem to affect them. At least, I mean, I'm not saying that that's 100%. Like everybody gets in car wrecks, but yeah, like I don't see magic really coming back on people threefold just because it's baneful. There's no way that you can perform a ritual like that and have it not affect you, because you're having to make contact with that energy. That energy is coming from you. And if nothing else, like I'll tell you, the worst thing I've had to deal with throwing a curse is have the person come back and beg my forgiveness and be sorry. And there was nothing that I could do at that point. It was already done. And if you have a conscience, if you put a curse on somebody and then you watch them truly suffer to the point where you're like, all right, man, that's enough. I didn't think it would be that bad. That's the kind of stuff that bothers me, and affects me about doing curses. That's why I'm so careful with it. Like if I'm not 100%, this person needs to go, period, and I will never regret that, then I don't throw curses.